Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Today's video is brought to you by Predictable Revenue's Service LinkedIn Outbound. Find out how we can leverage and grow your existing LinkedIn network to book meetings into your calendar at the link below.
There are times to add new features to your product, times to pivot to a completely different use case, and times to straight up throw it all out the window and invent something new. If you're not anticipating every little change in your market, then you're already behind. I'm your host, Sarah Hicks, and on today's episode of Predictable Revenue Podcast, I'm going to be asking an expert, what's next? How do we predict what's around the corner in the fast-paced, ever-changing tech industry? He's CEO of Stackline, a retail technology company based in Seattle, Washington. Founded by a group of Amazon veterans, Stackline activates data, automates execution, and optimizes e-commerce marketing performance for thousands of the world's largest companies. Before founding Stackline, he held data analytics roles at Amazon and the Boston Consulting Group, where he helped consumer brands turn insights into commercial excellence. And before all that, he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School. Michael Lagoni, welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So excited about this conversation. Michael, first of all, you started Stackline and you made it profitable from day one. How on earth did you do that?
Well, it started small. I was working at Amazon before founding the company. And when I decided to launch the firm, I started it with $300 in this little one-room apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. And I had this vision for these amazing enterprise software products that we were going to build, but I was pretty realistic in knowing that it was going to take several years to bring those to market. So I thought, in the short term, I can just pick up the phone and call some mid-sized consumer brands and manufacturers and tell them that, hey, we don't have the software ready yet, but in the meantime, I will crunch the numbers manually for you in Excel and PowerPoint and provide the data and insights through that medium. And they said yes. I mean, we signed up some really great companies on that first day, companies like Purell and Cliff Bar, and they're all still our clients today, which is great, even though that was 5 or 6 years ago. But that's how we were able to launch the company as a service initially. And so for the first couple of years, the business was really, really small. We had just a handful of those brands on the service program. But in the background, we were building our technology and building our software products. So that phase of the company lasted a couple of years. And then when we officially launched the products, several years later, that's really where the company began to scale and commercialize.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think were some of the kind of key decisions that you made that allowed you guys to be so successful kind of right off the bat or so quickly?
I think that there are a few elements that certainly helped us. I mean, first is, we picked the right industry at the right time. Betting on e-commerce 5 or 6 years ago when it was much, much smaller than it is today. It's certainly a dominating force around the globe today, but it wasn't like that back then. But we could see that e-commerce, although small at the time, it was going to grow to really transform both retail and advertising. So that certainly helped. Just the wind has been at our back for sure. Beyond that, I think that we are very fortunate to have hired a really, really talented team of brilliant people. We have about 85 employees now, both here in Seattle as well as in Minneapolis, and just a wonderful group of people who have come together with a passion for e-commerce and a passion for delivering really innovative technology and services to this industry. And that has really, ensured that the company has grown over the years.
Makes sense. I've heard from a lot of product founders that one of the kind of challenges that they face is dealing with the early clients who are often kind of high maintenance clients possibly. And those clients have a lot of kind of input on the types of features that they would like to see because the product is still in development when a lot of them are kind of, these first users. And I've heard that down the line, these product founders look back and realize they were sort of led astray and they sort of took on too much of the suggestion and ended up maybe with a completely different product than what they wanted. So how did you learn to say no to your clients?
Yeah, that's such an interesting topic. I think it's very tempting to pursue many, many ideas and many opportunities when you're building a company, really because of a few core reasons. First, you're trying to listen to your customers and their feedback, and you want to keep them happy. And that can be very tempting to chase thousands and thousands of ideas and small sort of micro feedback that's coming in every day. But at the same time, this is an industry around e-commerce and digital advertising that is growing and changing very rapidly. So the industry itself is sort of bubbling up new opportunities to pursue almost every day.
So true, yeah.
So those things compound on one another, as you can imagine. And so it can be really, really tempting to build, Frankenstein products that are just bolting on feature after feature. So we decided very early on that we wanted to keep things simple. And that would benefit us and our product and our customers in the long term, as if our products were, had a very strong vision about, what they were trying to accomplish, and they were beautiful and easy to use, that would win in the long term.
Yes.
And so we built up some criteria that helps us really evaluate all the feedback that's coming in through its various forms. And we end up saying no to about 99% of the ideas that come in. And we always settle on kind of the top, 1 or 2% of ideas. And really, we look at it across a number of factors. As first is, how big is the opportunity? For us to build a new product or new feature, what is that opportunity size? And we really gauge that based on how many of our 2,000 clients are asking for that feature or product. If most of them are, we know we're onto something. If it's only a handful, then maybe it's an edge case and we shouldn't spend too much time on it. The second criteria is, okay, if we build it, does this really create some type of sustainable competitive advantage for our clients? Does it really create value for the brands that work with us? Most things are just small little feature requests, usability changes that don't really create net new value. So those are easy to kind of walk away from as well. Next are things that are more internally focused, where we like to work on things that are really unique and one of a kind. So sometimes we hear of an idea and we look out in the marketplace and we see other companies are already working on solving that problem, and maybe they're doing it well enough, then that's easy for us to say no to as well, because we sort of get excited about building one-of-a-kind products and technologies. So that's a big criteria for us internally. The next one is this going to be really hard and challenging to build? And if so, yes, we love working on things that are really hard, although it's painful in the short term. Longer term, if you can be the one company that solves a very, very difficult problem, then that is more valuable, but also you have kind of fewer competitors playing in that space, which is always nice if you're the only provider of something. And many of the most important things that we do as a company now took us years to invent. And so we like, making those bold bets. So those are some of the criteria, that we really look at, and that filters out the majority of incoming ideas.
That makes sense. So for those of you listening right now, if you want to take out that pen and paper and to recap kind of how you keep your eye trained for that 1% of good ideas that are going to be kind of flowing into you, you want to ask yourself, how big is the opportunity that this is going to create for you if you put in the time and resources to build up this feature or product? You want to ask yourself, does it create sustainable value for the client, and not just the one client that's asking for it, but for all of your clients? Ask yourself, is it unique, or is somebody else in the industry already doing it pretty well? And finally, is it hard to build? Because if so, can you be the one company that can solve this problem? So how do you make sure that you're right? Like, how do you stay ahead of the curve? What are you looking out for that lets you know that it's going to be the right thing?
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of art and science to it. The science part is listening to all of your clients and watching, how are they operating their business? What new tactics and strategies are they forming? What new ideas are they bringing? And, as we have a bigger and bigger sort of community and ecosystem around Stackline now, we have such great, feedback coming in that we can monitor and watch, and we can see those early signals about, okay, here are some new strategies or tactics that are working really, really well. And the next step is, once it makes it through that gauntlet of sort of criteria I talked about earlier, we then have several of our consultants go build a small prototype, a really, really quick, fast prototype. Our consultants will work in real time with these big consumer brands and get their feedback, and they'll iterate and show those prototypes to these brands and say, hey, do you like this? Will this create value? Will this give you a competitive advantage? What are the economics of this type of decision? And we learn a lot through that consulting team. Once it makes it through that phase, then we look to productize it. And so we have a nice assembly line in many ways, how we kind of take those raw ideas and then get them all the way through, the end product.
Are you looking anywhere of course, I'm sure you're monitoring the market. As you mentioned, even when you're going through that gauntlet, you've got to kind of check out what competitors are doing or other companies are doing. But are you looking for any other kind of external indicators on what new products to build, even if they don't necessarily come from that client base?
Yeah, that's also a really important element. That's more the art of it. And oftentimes we actually look at other industries. Just this past week, we've been working hard on a completely new product. It'll be one of a kind in the industry, but we didn't look at any of the current companies in the e-commerce space and how they're solving the problem, because no one is. So instead, we looked at other industries, and we were studying companies like TripAdvisor and Medium and Zillow and completely different companies in completely different industries, seeing how they have solved similar problems in the past. And we learn a lot from those companies and other industries, and we can sort of, model our ideas off of maybe how they have solved similar challenges. And so that can be a really, really great source of information as well.
Awesome. And you mentioned as well to me before about your idea of kind of undercurrent of tectonic trends. I think tectonic is such a kind of like funny, it's a sort of like a little pun on tech trends, tectonic, lovely. Anyway, you mentioned that you keep an eye out for these types of trends. Will you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's the other element that we watch pretty closely is like, what are those major forces that are shifting around, the foundations sort of moving underneath the big retailers. How are companies like Amazon and Walmart and Instacart evolving? What are those kind of secular trends? Not only what are they doing right now and how are they operating their marketplaces today, but what are those sort of micro changes happening right now that will be big movements, 2 years from now? Same thing, we analyze the consumer brands and manufacturers. How are they thinking about their business and moving their resources and team and talent away from brick and mortar and into the digital ecosystem? How are those small changes now going to, look 2 to 3 years into the future? So that's the other element of, I think, operating any successful software company is you have to really predict the future in many ways and be out ahead of the market by at least 2 to 3 years. So some of the big things we see happening right now are, first I would say just the rise of e-commerce, right? I mean, when I started the company, e-commerce in the United States was only about 4 to 5% of retail. Most recently, it's 27%. So it's continuing to grow very, very rapidly. And what's happening is more and more of these consumer brands are shifting their eyes towards it and their resources and marketing budgets and their teams and talents internally. So there's a lot more momentum coming at this space. But at the same time, the number of platforms that these brands have to manage is multiplying so quickly. Several years ago, if we had this conversation, I would say it's all, from a consumer brands perspective, the only retailer online that they really focused on was Amazon here in the US. But today, there's probably a group of 15 to 20 different online retailers that they're actively managing every day. The rise of Walmart, Instacart, Target, Chewy.com, even internationally now. Many of these brands are dedicating big resources to managing JD.com in China or Flipkart in India. And so that is creating a lot more work for these consumer brands. If you think about what's going on in their office every day, there's a lot more to manage because they went from a world of managing one platform to now managing 15. And so certainly that's something we're keeping a close eye on, is making sure that our software and services can scale and replicate across all of those new platforms, as they grow and emerge.
And sort of, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would dovetail on that would be the rise of all the marketing, self-service marketing programs. Each of these online retailers is now launching their own ad platform that, delivers self-service tools to these brands that they have to manage. So not only are they juggling, one retailer that an account team has to manage, but within that one retailer, there might be 15 different marketing programs they're running every day. So sort of the volume of work compounds on the marketing teams as well. So again, our technology has to be able to scale to handle all those various new marketing, programs that are coming out in the market.
Right. So looking kind of holistically at all of the things that factor into the decisions that you make when it's creating a new feature, creating a new product, how do you sort of negotiate or strike the balance between the trends and curves that you see coming ahead in the market and then those ones that your clients are asking for right now?
Yeah, well, luckily, I think a lot of those things tend to line up, more often than you would think, probably because oftentimes the brands have a pretty good sense of which platforms or what new marketing tools are really going to grow very rapidly, and we can make sure that we're out ahead of those curves, ensuring our products and services are aligned to that. So again, I think it goes back to our ability to just kind of see those early micro trends that are forming and see which ones are growing very rapidly, and then that's where we can place our bets.
Makes sense. So to kind of wrap up this whole conversation, put a nice little bow on it. Say there's somebody in the audience right now that wants to invent a hit product. Say they're coming from zero experience. They're not kind of pivoting. This is all from scratch. What do they need to do to make it that right one?
Yeah, it's a very important question. I'm sure every founder or any individual who's looking to maybe found a company someday asks themselves all the time. I think some of the key criteria are you want to spot an industry that is maybe small at that time, but you can confidently see is going to grow to become much, much larger in the years ahead. I think if you focus on industries that are already very, very large and mature, it can be hard to launch a new company in that space because there are probably a lot of very large incumbents that you will be competing with that have deep relationships with the target customers already, and that can be hard to disintermediate. So focusing on areas that might be small today, but will grow in the future, I think is the first, key criteria. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, I think making sure that your product or service really does create some type of real value, real economic value or economic gain, or maybe a competitive advantage for, the end user. Perhaps you're building software that's going to automate a lot of their tasks throughout the day, and you're going to save them a lot of time, or you'll be able to sort of more efficiently, make decisions and, run different programs that they're managing, really being able to quantify the economic value that the end user will receive from the product, I think is the next very, very critical step.
Great. So those of you watching, get the pen back out. You want to go for potentially a smaller industry that you see some growth in the future, but you can get in ahead of that really big growth. And you want to, of course, make sure that your product provides real value to that end user. Well, Michael, this was so interesting. You have such an amazing kind of success story that's obviously a testament to the fact that the things that you've shared with us really work. So that's wonderful. And I know I'm going to call you when I'm ready to develop my sort of first cutting edge tech product. And actually, the former chief product officer of Predictable Revenue, Kenny McKenzie, has a lot of ideas around specifically what you've been talking about. So I think maybe a future Predictable Revenue podcast episode, we'll have to have a little three-way panel on this and dig a little bit deeper. But anyway, thank you again, Michael, so much. Thank you for sharing with our listeners these incredible insights on how to stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing tech space.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. Shout out to Predictable Revenue's Service LinkedIn Outbound service for sponsoring this video. As a founder and sales leader myself, I know most of the best practices in terms of like what I need to be doing on LinkedIn, but sometimes I just don't have the time. What the right things to do are, but it comes down to a trade-off of where's my time better spent, and can I find somebody to click around on LinkedIn for me and book meetings, and then I can focus on higher level activities. And so think about it. What's the best use of your time? If you're a founder, sales leader, and you have a team, you need some meetings, I'd encourage you to check it out. I'm using it myself. I'm obviously the founder, so eating our own dog food. But if you're curious, click the link below to learn more.